And then the last piece of the certification process is your training and assessment. And this is actually the curriculum that you're delivering to the technicians. And as I stated before, a lot of people, immediately go to this section because this is kind of like the tangible piece. This is the product that you're selling in a lot of respects. But again, there's a lot of steps, a lot of quality control elements that you have to have in place before you get there. The training standards actually go in and define the minimum standards for every single course, including things around what kind of target groups you're looking at, whether the prerequisites for the participants, how long this course is valid, when they need a refresher, the aims and objectives, the duration of the course and timetables, the equipment that you need for it. It doesn't define specific equipment, but it'll say something like, you need 2 different types of emergency descent devices or something to that extent. You need, contactors or coils or something like that for a BTT course. What are your ratios of instructor to participant? And those are different from a classroom setting to a hands-on setting. And then kind of the real meat of it is the learning objectives. What are you actually teaching? And then how is the taxonomy built so that when you're reading a learning objective, you understand how that needs to be delivered to the participant. And then performance assessments. That's not just testing requirements. There's actual, depending upon the course, there may be observations and assessments of their actual hands-on performance in addition to testing. And every one of these standards is essentially set up the same. A few things I want to highlight on the standards, because we have a lot of standards. I'm not going to go into detail on like the BST standard or the BTT standard. But what I want to highlight is learning objectives. Every one of these standards is built around the concept of learning objectives. You're not going to find a canned course in the GWO system. What you're going to find is a list of learning objectives that you have to meet as you're building a training program. So it says things like, action verbs like identify, describe, demonstrate. This is the wording that's telling you what level of education or what level of performance, I should say, that the participant has to have. So you see example there, the instructor shall demonstrate how to attach and detach the glider to the wire system. And then it says the participant shall basically do the same thing. And then also then explain. So that's a lower level learning objective. So the demonstrate was a performance objective. The explain is a knowledge objective of how or why is it important that the up orientation of the fall arrestor must always point to the sky, And so every one of the standards actually has a guide on what these taxonomy levels are and what's the difference between a demonstrate or explain, how do they kind of fall in the level of engagement of the participant. Additionally, the standards will define the timetables. How long does it take to get through this course? These are minimum requirements. There is some flexibility in there around, combining certain elements. It may kind of describe it as a classroom learning, but you can do it out in your simulator area, your lab area. What it does highlight is the practical elements shall not be reduced in length, because again, these are minimum requirements. Companies can always add more to the training, company specific elements that maybe we want to add some additional skills. But these are the minimum requirements, and the auditors will be looking at these and seeing how in your instructor plans, you're making sure that you're meeting these minimum objectives. And one thing I also recommend is don't forget the annex in the back. It's way, way, way in the back of the standard. Some people forget about that one, but that's where the equipment lists are. That's where the list of applicable regulations, whether it's ANSI or NFPA or OSHA or EN standards. A lot of times there's guides for warm-up exercises per module. And then oftentimes there's specific guides on like how to achieve certain elements of it. Just kind of, recommendations. It's not, requirements necessarily, but it's, it kind of sets up some ideas on how you can move through these different elements of the standard.